Hello everyone, this is Rod from the Alchemist Den, our esoteric and hermetic study society. And today we will talk about Solomonic magic, which is a kind of magic very popular thanks to Hollywood's depiction, not only in Hollywood but also through the narrative, like we can see it in Dr. Faust and in many other stories. Is the typical magic where the magician stands in the middle of a circle and call forward a spirit or a demon and makes him obey to his or her commands. So it's a very fascinating kind of magic, and it's also well structured and complete system of magic in itself. Talk about Solomonic magic, we will have to start to talk about King Solomon, or better, who is King Solomon, or what does he represent? I say what does he represent because as of today, archaeologically speaking, we cannot confirm whether King Solomon did really exist or is just narration, or is just a story. Nevertheless, of course, the accounts of King Solomon are well documented in both the Hebrew Bible and the Quran, and we know that he was wealthy and wise king of Israel, being son of King David, and he allegedly lived around 1000 BC. Of course, King Solomon is mostly famous because of his temple, the King Solomon's temple, that he wanted to build, or actually he built, in order to erect a dwelling place for the God of Israel, and in the Sanctum Sanctorum, in the most holy place of this temple, he was supposed to put the Ark of Covenant. In the Quran is interesting because the figure of King Solomon is also associated to the one of a magician. So in the Quran it says that he could understand the language of the birds, control the wind, rule over the jinn. The jinn are pretty much the equivalent of our demons in Arabic language. And he could also hear the speeches of the ant. So it's described more like a magician than anywhere else, than anything else. And then we find him again in the narrative of the 1001 Arabian Nights, where he actually is depicted in several stories, the most famous being the one of the fisherman that fishes this bottle out of the water, and then he opens it and the jinn comes out. And this jinn actually, he was actually sealed into the bottle by King Solomon. About the temple of King Solomon has a very strong echo in our esoteric, in our Western esoteric representation and history and meaning. We find King Solomon temple echoing into the Rider White Tarot. In the High Priestess, you see the High Priestess is in between the two pillars that were supposed to be the two big pillars at the entrance of King Solomon. The Temple of King Solomon is also the main narrative in Freemasonry, and then we find it again in the Knights Templar. In fact, as we know, the name Templar is referred to the Solomon Temple because these originally nine knights stationed on the ruins of what were supposed to be built the first Solomon's temple, and digged to find something, and they actually digged for several years, and then they went back to Europe. So anyway, again, the name Templars is also referred to the King Solomon Temple, so you can see how wide this story echoed into our Western occult culture. Now we talk about the origin of the Solomonic magic, and to talk about the origin, we will have to rewind all the way to the golden time of Alexandria. The golden time of Alexandria being, say, from the Egyptian time, then later with the invasion of Alexander the Great, the Greek Egyptian time, and finally with the takeover from the Roman, it became part of the Roman Empire. But this Alexandria, which was a little bit like a New York, but then it was a blend of many cultures, especially related to philosophy, history, science, arts, and it blended Egyptian history, Babylonian, Jewish, Roman, and even early Catholic history. So we have this document, these fragments here and there, written, of course, in different languages, which were compiled between the 100 BC to the 400 AD, today known as the Greco-Roman magical papyri. And these are really a collection of spells, evocations, exorcism, collected from different kind of culture, as we mentioned, mainly from the Egypt, Jewish, Babylonian, Greek, and Roman. These documents are somehow interlaced to the Talmud, which was written in Galilee between the 300 and the 500 AD, and a little bit later in a book that we will see a little bit from a little bit more in the next slide, called the Testament of Solomon. The Testament of Solomon, we cannot really identify precisely the date where it was written, but most likely it was between the end of the first century to the early medieval times. I would say between the 900, 1200, 300. And from this heritage, after the fall of Alexandria, most of these writing were brought over to Constantinople or Byzantium, where Constantinople was the last, well, it was the capital of the Roman Empire of the West, but was also the last place where the Roman Empire was falling apart. So it was the place where it lasted longer. So all these documents and practice and culture and ritual were brought over to Constantinople. And here we have another collection based again on this heritage called the Hygromanthia. Documents that are dated between the 1300 to the 1450 AD. Finally, after the complete fall of the Roman Empire, so also Constantinople fell, and this corpus of documents were sailed to Italy, namely Venice in particular, and then from Venice they started to spread in, of course, in Italy, in Germany, in France, and in England, and they started to be translated. Original language were, of course, Greek, especially for the Hygromanthia was mainly Greek, and they started to be translated into Latin, into English, French, and German. And here we are around the medieval time, so we reach around the 15 to 1600. So let's see the same story that we saw in the map. Now we see through the writings, and especially the whole point of this Solomonic thing starts from the story of the ring. So this ring that was given to Solomon by God, and with this ring Solomon could control and have power over demons. And what Solomon did with this power over the demon, well, he forced them to help him to build the famous Solomon Temple. And this story is found in the Babylonian Talmud and in the Testament of Solomon. So everything starts from the ring in which Solomon could control the demon. And as we saw it in the map, then it came down to the Hygromanthia at the Byzantine time, and finally we are in the Middle Age. In the European Renaissance, past the European Renaissance, we have the Key of Solomon and the Lesser Key of Solomon, or Lemegeton, how you want to call it. What is Solomonic magic about? Well, it's very peculiar, and there are few points, few basic points that immediately may be identified as a Solomonic magic. And the first point is that it's a complete system of magic, so it's a complete technology for invoking and evoking all kinds of spiritual entities, going from gods through angels, demons, and all other spirits in between, including spirits of the dead. Another point about the Solomonic magic is that it's a very well structured system. And as we saw before through the Greek-Egyptian magical papyrus, through hygromantia, and the Key of Solomon in the Middle Age, although many fragments are lost here and there and recompiled, but nevertheless the core is pretty much the same. So we have a pretty much consistent history and explanation of this kind of magic. The magician, you will find him always performing his ritual within a protective circle. This circle is echoing the Egyptian magic, where the magician was standing, where actually was using a snake to as a circle, and this snake, of course, represents the nature of the Ouroboros. Next point is that the ritual involves specific implements or materia magica to be prepared, constructed, and consecrated in advance prior to the ritual itself. Now, these copies that I have here in the slide are taken directly from the book, from the Key of Solomon. And you see, just to give an example, you see a knife, you see a sickle, you see a sword, you see the wand, the staff, the circle, and the triangle of manifestation. Especially talking about the implements where you see symbols in it. So in the books actually explains how to make these tools, what kind of symbols, what kind of sigil to engrave into the tools, and of course they also explain how to consecrate these tools. Next, we have written invocation or evocations that are full of what we call barbarous word or nomina magica. The nomina magica are mainly coming from Jewish tradition, as you can see in the bottom there, like Adonai, El, Elohim, Elohi, Eya, Shereyeh. These are all names, of course, imported from the Jewish tradition, although not only that, we may find also other names coming from the Greek, Egyptian, or transliteration in Coptic of name of gods and angels and demons. Particular to the Solomonic magic is the sequence of the process. And the process is in 5 steps, very clear steps, starting from the first, the consecratio Dei, which is the consecration of the tools, the invocatio, the invocation. This is where the magician invokes the higher power. And then the third step, we have the evocatio, so evocation of the spirit, demon, whatever is the ritual supposed to be. Fourth step, one of the most important steps of the process, the ligatio, or the binding, to bind the spirit to do your will. And finally, the fifth and last step, which is the licentia, or the license to depart. So consistently repeated over and over, and is the structure basically of the Solomonic magic. Now we look a little bit at the books. So we mentioned about mainly two books that we have today, is the Key of Solomon and the Lesser Key of Solomon. Starting from the Key of Solomon, the Key of Solomon is mainly divided in 2 books. The first one containing the conjuration invocations to constrain the spirits, to invoke and constrain the spirits and the demons. And in the book 2, describing the different prayers, purification, consecration that the magician has to do, like the bath and what to say, the consecration of the clothing, the prayer to do to consecrate the clothing, and so on. And then we have the lesser key of Solomon, Lemegeton or Lemegeton, and this book is divided into other 5 books, namely the Ars Goetia, the Ars Theurgia Goetia, the Ars Paulina, the Ars Almadel, and the Ars. Here I have an example. I'm going back to the Key of Solomon. This is an example of what you find inside, and what I put here is a part of the book where he explains how to make pentacle. Pentacle are some kind of talisman that concentrate the power of a certain planet, and through the energies of this planet are captured into this object, which is the pentacle. And in this part of the books, it goes through all the 7 planets and all the pentacle that can be made, and the properties of this pentacle. As you see here, I've just put Mercury as an example, and the explanation, like for example, the first pentacle of Mercury is served to invoke the spirit who are under the firmament, and so on and so forth. Now, the Lesser Key of Solomon, for sure, this is the most famous book of the whole collection of Solomonic Magic, the Lesser Key of Solomon, and especially the first book of the Lesser Key of Solomon, the Ars Goetia. But there is also one more that I wanted to mention, which is the Ars Notoria, and I wanted to mention about the Ars Notoria because it's slightly different from the other books. Well, while in the other mainly everything is related to invoking and evoking spirits, the Ars Notoria is a method for rapid learning. So basically, what you're supposed to do is, like, you're looking at these images that you see there on the right side of the screen. By looking at these images, and then you have these prayers or invocation that you're supposed to read or to chant while you look at the picture. And by doing this, going back to your studies, you'll be able to learn and retain much faster than a regular, say, if you want to learn a language, will take you maybe 1/3 of the time by using this method. So I just wanted to mention this because it's a little bit different. This Ars Notoria is a little bit different from the other that we find within the corpus of the Solomonic Magic. Then we go, of course, to the most famous one, the Ars Goetia. The Ars Goetia, which I think pretty much everybody knows, is a registry. Is a registry of 72 spirits that allegedly King Solomon has evoked and controlled in order to help him to build the temple. And this book, this Ars Goetia, provides the method, instructions, and list, of course, on how to evoke and command these 72 spirits. Just wanted to emphasize again, this is a registry. It's not really a magical diary. It's not really a book that teaches how to do it, but it looks more like a diary from a magician. As we can find in many other grimoires in the Solomonic tradition, we find other registry like in the Grimorium Verum or other kind of grimoires where we have a different list of demons or like a different number, different names. So it looks like every magician had his own registry, and this Ars Goetia has 72 spirits, which also became the most famous 72 spirits or 72 demons. Okay, let's go a little bit more in detail about the Ars Goetia. Here we see the basic setting to perform the ceremony. We will have a magic circle where the magician stands inside, And then we have what is called the triangle of manifestation. In the triangle of manifestation is where the demon or the spirit is supposed to appear and be contained. Now there is so many different interpretation of these. In the book is not clearly explained, but this triangle is supposed to be 3 feet from the circle. It's not clear whether it's supposed to be on the floor or across, and it's not clear whether in the middle of this triangle is supposed to use a black mirror or like a crystal, or it's not clear. We have many interpretation. Definitely one thing that works the most is to put a black mirror, so that the black mirror can be used as a spirit, in order for the spirit to manifest, to show part of itself. This is very briefly and in summary how the process work. So we have your circle, you have the 4 pentagram on the 4 corners where you put the candles, and then facing east you have the triangle of manifestation. You may want to put there some incense, which is related to the spirit that you want to call. You may want to put your black mirror or crystal in order to have a place where you can actually visualize the spirit or the demon. And also in there you put the sigil of the demon. Then the magician stands in the middle of the circle, perform his invocation first and evocation of the spirit and the demon later, and the demon spirits will somehow appear, or let the magician know his presence. When the spirits arrive, the magician will have to bind the spirit and to command. Once everything is completed, as we see the 5th and the last step, it will be the license to depart, so to release the demon and spirit back to his original place. So in the Ars Goetia, in this registry of 72 spirits, what we find is, first of all, the name of the spirit and the sigil of the spirit. These are the 2 key points in order to be able to evoke the entity, the name and the sigil. In the description, you see there is a number, which is now I'm using Vassago, which is the 3rd spirit in the list, in the registry. So you will have the number, which is the 3rd spirit, and then you will have a hierarchical name. He's a mighty prince, so you have a hierarchical name. And then you will have the description of his powers. It says his office is to declare things past and to come, and to discover all things hid or lost. Finally, you have the legions of spirit that this entity controls. So this is pretty much the structure. So you have a registry number, you have the hierarchy of the spirit, you have his powers, and how many legions is controlling. So as Vassago, we saw being a mighty prince. Going through the list, what you will find kings, you will find dukes, earls, marquises, presidents, princes, and knights. The hierarchy is divided in 7, and these 7 hierarchical steps are corresponding to the 7 planets. So kings correspond to Sun, dukes to Venus, and so on, which means that the spirit that falls into that specific hierarchy is a spirit related to that specific planet. These help us to know which incense to burn, or what kind of correspondence we may use in order to be able to make this process simpler to call the spirit, by knowing which planet rules this spirit. And then there is another another theory, another way of doing Goetia. And this way, I think it was most likely Dr. Rudd in the 16th century, if I'm not wrong, the first to come up with this idea, and then this idea was brought over to most of the modern occultism, for sure in the Golden Dawn, and other modern way to perform these operations. Basically, what is said is like, as we have 72 spirits, and we know there are 72 Shema Mephora angels, what we can assume or conclude is that for each spirit there is one Shema Mephora angel. Now, if you don't know what is the Shema Mephora angels, of course, I'm not gonna go into details now. I mean, we may talk about it in another session. Of course, it was a little bit out of context, but if you know what are the 72 Shema Mephora angels, you may be also thinking, okay, 72 spirits, 72 Shema Mephora angels. Most likely there is a connection. Well, I personally would put a big question mark, because again, as we say, Ars Goetia is one of the registry of spirit. There is many others throughout the Renaissance and throughout medieval time with different numbers, with different spirits. So it looks more like the 72 is like casually happen to be a registry of 72 spirit. But just for information, we'll explain what it means to have the connection with the Shema Mephora's angel. The Shema Mephora angel is built around is built connecting the planets, built connecting the deacons, of course the Shema Mephora's angels, and then if we put in there also the 72 spirits with certain correspondence that, again, I'm not going to explain here in detail because it's going to take 1 hour just to explain this diagram. But the point is that according to this theory, for each and every spirit of the Goetia, say Vassago, as we are using Vassago as an example, we can see there in the wheel that opposed to Vassago, we found a Shema Mephora angel called Sitile. So in some form of Goetia, in some form of practical Goetia, you may find a system where the Shema Mephora angel's sigil is written on the back of the spirit sigil to control him, or around it, or there's many different ways that can be, but the concept would be that the Shema Mephora angel would be controlling the spirit, making the Goetia operation safer. Lastly, let's have a look a bit about what are the spirits, what are these demons that we are talking about. Essentially, this demon, whether if you look at them from Platonic perspective or a Neoplatonic perspective or like a chaotic perspective, depending on what is your background, or from a Christian Catholic point of view, mainly we can say that these demons, these spirits, these lower spirits are something like chaotic energies that are not maybe evil in itself, they're just not properly directed. They are uncontrolled forces, so it's not that they're not out there to haunt you, to catch you. That's just what they do. I mean, there is chaos, and then there is cosmos, there is order and there is disorder. So there's forces that destroy and forces that create, but they're both necessary. And so these demons, these entities we can somehow compare them to uncontrolled forces. Of course, they are lower entities because they are the one closer to our material world, and they linger below the Yesod, below the lunar sphere. Or you also find old gods and entities from ancient civilization which have been cursed to become demons once the political and religious system has taken over. Like some example are the first Baal, for example. The Baal was actually King Baal. We have Astaroth, which was actually the princess Queen Astarte. So we have identified some demons that were actually gods, but again overthrown by some political and religious overtaking in history. So finally, what is the Solomonic magic about, and why we have the story of Solomon? The whole point is that the magician becomes King Solomon, and there's nothing evil in this kind of magic, because the point is to invoke the higher. So you become King Solomon, you invoke the higher entities, then you evoke the lower entities in order to do your will. So it's the higher to control the lower for good purposes. And here we go back to the story of King Solomon, where he used the demons, so he used evil, chaotic forces for a good use, which is to build his temple. And this is basically pretty much all what is this magic about. Finally, I would like to recommend some reading and also the reference for this presentation. I definitely recommend the Techniques of Greco-Egyptian Magic by Stephen Skinner, a really great book for reference. The Book of Solomon Magic by Carol Pope Runyon. Runyon is definitely one of the living master for Solomonic tradition. And then we have The Key to Solomon Key by Lemegeton, another really beautiful book. And staying on the traditional books, of course, we have The Key of Solomon by MacGregor Mather, and the Lesser Key of Solomon. The one that I'm using for this presentation in particular is the Lawrence version, and then some Wikipedia, of course, for some definition here and there. So this is about it for this session, quote-unquote session about Solomonic magic. Thank you so much for your attention, and I hope you will be with us again for the next topic. Have a great day. Thank you.